All right, let's jump right in. Have you ever come across someone who seems to see the world on a whole different level? Like they're reading between the lines of life itself, seeing a pattern that the rest of us might miss. Well, today, we're going to explore the mind of a thinker just like that, a man who sees everything through a really unique lens.
This one line, it's the key that unlocks his entire philosophy. The idea is that everything happening around us, all the big world events, they're not just random noise. Nope, they're data. They're a story, just waiting for someone to come along and analyze it.
And that, right there, is the big question we're going to unpack. Who is this analyst he's talking about, and what exactly do they see when they look at the world? Well, the answer to that starts with the story of the man who wrote these words. See, to really get the idea, you first have to understand the person behind it. His journey and his philosophy are totally intertwined. You can't have one without the other. So let's get to know the man behind the analysis. So this is Jay Saran. He calls himself a versatile transactional analyst. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, transactional analysis, or TA for short, is basically a way of understanding people by looking at how they interact, the transactions between them. It says we all have these three sides to us: a parent, an adult, and a child. What made Saran so unique is that he took these ideas and applied them not just to people, but to the entire world. His path to becoming this analyst really kicked off when he was young, in a city that would become a huge part of his identity, Trichy, in Tamil Nadu. It was here that the seeds of his worldview were planted. You can see from this timeline just how much Trichy shaped him. At 16, he's in college there. By 20, he's confident enough to be speaking on the radio. And then, at 24, comes the big one. That light bulb moment where he discovers the field that would change everything for him: transactional analysis. And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? He doesn't just say he was from Trichy. He says the city became an integral part of who he was. It was the stage for his whole transformation. 400. Let that number sink in for a second. When this guy discovered transactional analysis, he didn't just dip his toes in. He dove headfirst, reading almost 400 books on the subject. For a 24-year-old, that is an absolutely incredible amount of dedication. But, a journey like that rarely happens in a vacuum. He had a mentor, a guy named Mr. Ratnam, who was a huge supporter of the TA movement in the area back then. It was Mr. Ratnam who got him access to all those books and gave him the push he needed for his next big step. And that next step, man, it was a huge one. In 1979, thanks to Mr. Ratnam, Saran went to his very first International Transactional Analysis Conference. This was the moment where all that intense solo book learning finally collided with the global TA community. And just look who was there. He wasn't just some guy in the audience. He was meeting the heavy hitters of the field. We're talking the president of the TA Society of India, top international facilitators, founders of entire new schools of thought. You have to imagine, for this young guy from Trichy, this experience was absolutely mind-blowing. Okay, so after all that deep study and this massive encounter with the global TA world, how did Jai Saran end up seeing things? He actually summed it all up in a poem, the very same one we started with. So let's break down some of its core ideas. So first up, his take on nature. For an analyst, nothing is just passive. He sees nature not as some static backdrop for our lives, but as an active system, a network that's actually participating, helping out those who deserve it. So the big takeaway here is this: to a transactional analyst, even the natural world is part of the system. It responds, it participates, it's not just there, it's an active player in the game. All right, next, he turns that sharp, analytical eye towards politics. And wow, this line, he does not pull any punches. He's looking at the language politicians use and seeing a total disconnect between what they say they're doing, public service, and what's actually coming out. And the lesson here is pure analysis, right? Don't just take the words at face value. A transactional analyst listens to the speech, but they're analyzing the transaction happening underneath. They're asking, okay, what's really being communicated here? Then he zooms out even further to a huge societal level with this observation about justice. What he's saying is that there's this kind of universal balancing act. Bad things that go unchecked don't just vanish. The consequences always eventually get paid. I mean, that's a pretty deep philosophical idea.
It's the notion that a whole society, just like a person, can't really escape the results of its own actions. The analyst sees these long-term patterns of cause and effect playing out over history. So, we've got an active nature, political speech that needs decoding, and this deep belief in societal consequences. What does it all add up to? What's the final overarching lesson from Jay Sarin's worldview? And here it is. This is the ultimate takeaway. For someone who is truly listening, for the transactional analyst, the world isn't just a chaotic mess. It's a curriculum. It's a giant collection of educational material, constantly teaching us something if we just know how to look. Which leaves us with a really fascinating thought to walk away with. If Jay Sarin is right, if everything from today's headlines to the changing weather is part of some grand lesson plan, what do you think the world is trying to teach us today?